You are listening to 88.3 FM KUCR in Riverside, streaming online at kucr.org. You are tuned in to a special edition of The Gloaming. That's the name of my show. I'm here with Vanessa Ferrel, who is currently a MD MPH student pursuing a dual degree, both at UC San Diego Medical School and at Columbia, right?
That's right.
I've forced her to come on with me so that we could talk about some things. Actually, for the past couple months, I've been thinking about maybe doing a show on public health issues and just healthcare in general in the United States and maybe even elsewhere. But I think having somebody like Vanessa to talk to about it would be interesting and educational, and I think a lot of people would want to know what you have to say about a lot of stuff. So thanks for coming.
No problem.
And talking. She's also UCR alumnus, by the way, which is super cool. And so I guess for people out there that have no idea what public health is and want to know more about it, do you want to kind of say what you're doing right now and why you're doing it and stuff like that?
For sure. So it all began a long, long time. No, I'm just kidding. The gracious introduction. I'm taking a leave between my third and fourth year of medical school to do a year of public health to get a master's degree. I guess the way that I kind of define public health is in comparison to medicine. So I think that medicine is for me kind of more an individual kind of approach to healing, whereas public health involves the kind of at the community level, group level, neighborhood level, population level, seeking approaches to not only manage existing diseases, but also prevent diseases and really taking into account all of the kind of social determinants of health, looking at how things like education, socioeconomic status, like where you live, like all of these different things kind of affect health and affect the health of kind of populations at large, rather than kind of this precision-based medicine, like having one patient in your office and just kind of deciding on a very customized plan for them.
So, did you always know that you wanted to pursue both at the same time, or is that something that kind of came along later?
No, I had no idea. I think that before I started medical school, I had an interest in kind of disadvantaged populations as a Black, queer, Latinx woman. It's kind of like serving all of my identities and like my communities and that kind of thing. I think that my desire to pursue a degree in public health really came from being in medical school and kind of seeing how like whiteness is the standard. And I think that that's so much of just because medicine is such a microcosm of society at large, and so it's very entrenched in kind of white supremacy, and it kind of depends on that to survive. And so having whiteness as a standard and these kind of other populations being like othered or marginalized or like kind of put to the side as like electives, that was really dissatisfying for me. And so I thought that having a public health focus where instead of operating on the assumption of equality, I pursued public health because of the emphasis of equity and kind of that understanding that equity was something that needed to be focused on in order to really improve the health of populations at large.
That's so cool.
Thanks.
So I don't know if you know this, but the first time I think I ever saw you, because I've seen you before, even though you haven't seen me,
Right.
which is very creepy.
Not creepy at all.
Very creepy. So I was taking classes at UC San Diego when I believe it was your first year maybe of medical school. And you were helping to organize the White Coat Die-In. And it was, December 2014?
Yep.
And first of all, I was like, was very inspired and really like excited all of a sudden, because I kind of had I've public health. I didn't know what to call it really, but the way you describe public health is how I've always viewed medicine. Like I've kind of never really separated the two, and I think it's because during my undergrad I was working at Free Clinic, the student-run health clinic, which is actually Riverside Free Clinic now, the whole time. And so this, like, a lot of these things were in my mind. Like I was noticing a lot of these things, not in an academic sense, but kind of just through experience. And I was having trouble as a student kind of remembering those things in the class, because it's not something you really talk about as a pre-med unless you're specifically taking like sociology classes or something like that. Like they kind of keep those two things separate, which to me is completely counterintuitive and counterproductive and weird, honestly. But anyways, when I saw you there and I saw that you were organizing and you were very active, and all the other students that were with you that were really like vocal and passionate and amazing, and it was like it was super powerful for me. But anyways, I wanted to ask you, when did the like social justice aspect of medicine and public health kind of come into your life? Like when did that start for you?
Yeah, RE White Coats for Black Lives, the White Coat Die-In of 2014. That was actually initiated kind of through Region 1 of the Student National Medical Student Association. So basically, I was one of the leadership members for the UCSD chapter, and we got an email, like, it's basically like the Pacific Northwest and California. So got an email from someone from SNMA at UCSF, and that was like, we're planning on doing this kind of die-in demonstration. And we just wanted to invite y'all to kind of come on board if you were interested in kind of showing solidarity. And so my ride or die at med school, Nicole, who's also currently pursuing a master's degree but at Harvard, so we basically were the two people within our class who were kind of most actively doing social justice type stuff. And so being the planners that we were just like, yeah, we'll totally do it. And then kind of based our plan for the day off of what had been presented to us from the kids at UCSF White Coats for Black Lives. But yeah, no, it was definitely, like, I remember, like, I still get chills, you know, even though it's been like 3 years or something like that. Just like remembering like standing in front of the silent tree. Nicole and I had no idea how many people were gonna come or if people were gonna show up, like, aside from like our 3 friends. That we were like, please just like bring people to this place and we'll like play it by ear kind of thing. So we're standing at the silent tree, just kind of like discussing between the two of us, like, well, I hope like 5 people show up kind of thing. And then we like hear like this murmur of chanting in the distance, and I was like, well,
my gosh,
it sounds like there's at least 5 people like chanting. And just like witnessing these like people like coming up the like library walk, like from the School of Medicine, which is so far like separated from the rest of the main campus at UCSD. It's basically coming from the southernmost part of campus, walking and chanting and holding signs and like wearing their white coats in all black. And just like, I was like, okay, that's definitely more than 5 people. So as soon as we like begin to be in like earshot of each other, Nicole and I start chanting back. And then just beautiful like coalescence of like, hands up, don't shoot, like, you know, like me and one of my really good friends here standing next to each other in this like massive gathering of people that were like people that were in my class that I like knew because we have a small class, but weren't really like my like good friends or within the same social circles necessarily. But it was just like people were out there and they were like very like, you know, they showed up. And so that was something that was really I think a personally powerful moment for me, and I think one of like the more significant aspects of like social justice within like medical school. And I remember that like in addition, like something that I've heard a lot from other people that were like the non-med school folks who were able to like join us or witnessed it. They were just like, oh, this is like the first time that I've ever seen people from the medical school out here. Like, forget that y'all exist.
Right. 'Cause they're used to them just being in the library or like inside, you know, in the medical school. It was so... I remember that moment too. I remember seeing it was like a parade. It was so many people. I was like, there's no way that's just the medical school. Like the pharmacy school's got to be in there. Like everyone's in there. And people were so excited to be there. Like but it was also, there was like a sense of urgency that was very real. Like you could feel it, you know, like it was so powerful. And I also had no idea what to expect either. I think I got like a Facebook invite and like kind of, I think I went by myself. Like, I saw my friend Michelle there. She was the only one that was in the same program as I was at the time. And it was incredible. It was really, really cool. And I think I started following like White Coats for Black Lives after that, but that was like a that was like the birth of that organization, was it not? Like at first, like that was because it was a national die-in sort of thing. Like I remember seeing pictures from like medical schools across the nation, them doing the same thing. And I think everybody was surprised to see that many people, but also really excited. And it created this like very real sense of awareness in the med school community, and people that were interested in social justice and stuff felt like it almost gave them like a space to kind of be able to talk about a lot of these issues a lot more in a way that wasn't maybe possible before. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how are your classes like at Columbia? What is maybe the most valuable thing so far that you've gained from Columbia overall, academically or not academically?
Just in general?
Yeah.
What is one highlight of this year? Yeah, I mean, I think so. Part of the reason that I decided to pursue a master's degree, aside from like wanting like a kind of formal skill set in like advocacy and really understanding like how to effectively serve my communities, was just like I really needed a break. Like I was hitting a point where I was like super dissatisfied. Like after going through like third year of med school, it's just like a lot of bureaucracy, and like it's really challenging, I think, especially like seeing how you know, all of these like, oh, we're not really talking about like racism or structural oppression or injustice in our med school curriculum, just kind of like pathology and pathophysiology and like don't sleep with your patients kind of thing. But like seeing how that kind of plays out when you're on the wards, and like seeing, I think especially like language disconcordance, where a lot of like residents or attendings think that they speak Spanish, but like their idea of them speaking Spanish is kind of to like yell broken Spanish at patients. Mm-hmm. And like if the patient kind of like hesitates or doesn't really get it, just to speak louder, because that's how language works, and that's like what is going to be the most effective thing. Or just like kind of disparaging remarks that I'd hear about patients or like other like specialties, and kind of just how like hierarchical based it was. And I was just like, okay, I need a little break. Yeah. So I think that something that I definitely enjoyed from my public health experience has been like having that break. I think also just like meeting people, and like in this environment where people aren't immediately turned off when I start talking about social justice, because I feel like so much of my efforts within like medical school were basically to like convince people that like social determinants of health existed, or like these are important things, like we should ask our patients like about food insecurity or housing insecurity, or like we should know what their literacy level is, like that kind of thing. Whereas like in public health, like there's kind of a fundamental like understanding, like that's one of the foundations of public health, is like these social determinants of health, along with the biological and environmental determinants of health. So I think I've really liked being in spaces where I don't have to like educate my peers on like, why don't we, talk about how environmental injustice, like that kind of thing. It's like people are generally aware of the issues, and if they're not aware of the issues, then it's like, oh, this is something I should know about, rather than that's like erroneous information that I like don't have time to cram into my brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's my fave.
What do, not to put you on the spot, but what do we do about that? Like that's, that's really alarming that there are people in medical school that don't think that the social determinants of health are sometimes, even most of the times even, more important to acknowledge, at least first, before getting to like the biological things, I don't know if I'm saying that the right way. I don't know if I'm making sense, but like there's sometimes you can't properly help a patient in a biological sense if you're not acknowledging all these other factors that are weighing down on them.
Right.
It's like, and then even from like a shallow perspective, it leads to like a waste of resources and time. It's like we if we're not actually helping them, we're just putting band-aids on things and not we're not actually helping them.
Yeah. Or even worse, like prescribing band-aids and like not even ensuring that they can get those band-aids.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like that's definitely a question, like I think about this a lot and just like, why do I hate everything so much is where this starts. But I like I don't know, like reflecting on it, I think that it's at so many levels, because I think like the way that like medicine, like, okay, so who goes into medicine and who, like, what does the training look like and what are the outcomes? Like, I don't know, I guess there's like kind of different things. So kind of starting at the beginning, like looking at like who goes into medicine. So I think part of that is just, of course, like representation and who thinks that they, like, who even thinks that they can be doctors kind of thing. Like, you can't be what you can't see. And then not only, like, having the, like, idea or, like, ambition or, like, oh, maybe I want to be a doctor someday. It's also just, like, the pre-medical requirements are, like, ridiculous.
Right.
Like, you know, like, clinical experience, volunteer experience, research experience, like, these kind of thing. It's, like, this, like, not necessarily an algorithm, but it kind of is an algorithm, and you have to be really good at standardized testing, and like MCATs have to be on point, and like all of these kinds of things. So already in there, it's kind of deprioritized, like this like knowledge or awareness or motivation to address like social issues. And so I think like pipeline programs are really important for me. I think especially when we're talking about like, you know, like if medicine is a microcosm of society and it is like just like entrenched in whiteness, and with the United States like heading toward a browner and browner demographic, like it doesn't make sense to just like continue perpetuating that whiteness. Like we're making people unhealthy by perpetuating this on like the whiteness. And so like getting Black and brown kids, Black and like Latinx students like into like medicine and successfully like recruiting and retaining them, like that's super important. But at the same time, like thinking of like, well, some people, you know, they can just go and like do like research or something for a summer because they have connections, or like their parents are like they have network connections because like their parents or their familial status kind of thing. And then there's people who like can't like afford to do research because they have to like be taking care of their families kind of thing. And so the way that like privilege kind of plays a huge part in who's able to kind of get anywhere near like approaching medical school, and then like seeing like standardized like testing and like the MCAT, I know that like is restructured or something now, like it's changed since I took it, but when I took it there was like zero emphasis on any kind of social anything. And like even in like the pre-med requirements when it's all these like very intense advanced level like hard sciences, and not like demonstrate your awareness of like structural oppression in the like it's nowhere in the application process. And so like I think not only are we potentially like missing a lot of like people who would be really good at medicine and who medicine really needs, particularly people who are willing and motivated to like serve their own communities, but also kind of like these other like not whatever pool is being recruited, like not already de-emphasizing that kind of thing. And so whatever, so I'm like, okay, well then you have your like medical students, and they are who they are, and you have the potential to shape them into however you see fit. And kind of like medical education in and of itself is problematic inevitably because it exists, but like the de-emphasis on social issues in like even like accreditation like guidelines, if every school is going to be held to the same like standards of like, you know, making sure that like organ systems physiology and pathophysiology is taught, and like clinical exam skills, like that kind of thing, like it kind of ends up being like any mention of like minority populations or like cultural competency, cultural humility, like it kind of like ends up being like a check mark. So just like, okay, well, we did the diversity thing and now we're good, right? And then and that's even just preclinically, and then going into the wards, it's like, well, as like trainees, who are we learning from? And it's like the people who are perpetuating these inequities, and like we like are learning, like actively learning, like, oh, these are our role models, and so this is what like I should be doing in my future. But also at the same time, like a lot of like really good like humanity based stuff is like really like not really like explicitly discouraged, but it'll be like, oh, you know, well, this person spends a lot of time like with their patients when they could be more productive, like doing all of this work on the rounds kind of thing, which is definitely feedback that I've gotten. And then kind of even moving past med school or like looking at like clinical experiences and like residencies and like the way that like self-sacrifice is so heavily rewarded. Like I think that there's just so many like points for intervention in the system, which is a great opportunity. But yeah, I think it's also like for me very frustrating, to like see this and like see it be repeated and repeated and repeated and see how those things like affect the health of populations. Because basically every time that I've like brought something up within med school of like, so like when are we gonna start talking about how what we do like hurts patients kind of thing, like the response has always been like, well, you know, I think that the younger generation of physicians like you and your classmates like are doing a really great job. I have a lot of hope for the future, blah 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 blah. But like I think the reality of that for me is just like, okay, well, if that is true, that like me and my classmates are the future, like whoever we become is what kind of determines the health of the other people in the future, then whoever we're learning from, like we're learning the same thing, so we're indoctrinated into this culture,
right?
And so we're inevitably going to perpetuate so many of these things that like are obviously terrible. And so instead of like, oh, just wait for the old people to die and then everything will be better, like that's not gonna happen.
Right. Yeah. It's really sad.
A little bit.
So do you have any plans yet for what you're going to do once you graduate and get through residency and stuff? Do you have any like big picture plans or ideas for how to, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for asking you these like really hard questions. I'm just thinking like, do you know what you want to do once you are finally practicing to kind of try to be involved in a way that's not perpetuating all these horrible things and you know, no? Do you?
Like how am I going to fix all this?
Yeah, what are you going to do to fix everything, Vanessa?
Okay. So...
or just in general, like what is your ideal, like where do you see yourself in 10 years? Like, sorry.
It's not a stressful question at all. It's like an interview. So why medicine?
I'm really curious.
Why did you decide to do this? What specific experiences? What exactly do you want to do 10 years from now?
What will you be doing exactly?
And if you're wrong, what does that say about you? Oh my God. I mean, I want to do like HIV care. I think that's like I really just genuinely like enjoy working with like those, like it's like the intersection of all of my identities, and so it's just like it feels very like appropriate as far as like serving my communities. But I also, I don't know, like I don't really want to apply to residency next year, like despite graduating. So I like have to figure out what I'm going to do. I was a little bit more sure that I could just like skip out of residency for a couple years and like apply later in the future, but now it seems like science might be getting canceled, so I might have to do residency very soon.
Canceled?
Science is getting canceled. I don't know. I don't really know. But yeah, I mean, I want to have like some appendage, like a hand or a foot or a limb or like a nostril or something in every aspect of medicine. Like I want to do clinical medicine. I want to do like clinical based research. I want to do academic medicine, just basically just intervening at all points of the system that I feel I am able to. And I think like doing all that or saying that or like thinking about that with like the knowledge that that's not necessarily a sustainable model. So like my vision, my utopian vision for medicine is just like a complete destruction and dismantling of the current system and rebuilding it in a way that is equitable and does perpetuate justice instead of injustice.
Right. But unfortunately, I guess you have to take part in it to help people that are suffering because of it.
I guess so.
Well, how has it been being in your public health program during this kind of transition and kind of like, like the defunding of the Affordable Care Act and like all these things that are going on? Like, do they talk about it in class? Like, is it a big topic of discussion? Like, is it? Isn't it?
So it's really interesting that you ask that. I think so. Kind of pre-election type, like the way that like my like time in public health school stands out so far is kind of just like distinct, like pre-election, post-election, and like now whatever post-inauguration kind of thing. So pre-election, there was a lot of, at least so from my own whatever myopic perspective of the world and the environment that I occupy, like there was a lot happening as far as like kind of this continuous killing of Black bodies, and like that wasn't acknowledged or mentioned or appreciated or wasn't given a lot of space or time within my like classes and stuff. And so ended up kind of having these discourses outside of classrooms, which I think being in med school, like I'm like very used to doing, just kind of like community building outside of whatever classrooms, and not like depending on these classrooms to be like welcoming environments or like kind of spaces where it could like, oh, like I feel like a part of me has kind of died, but that's just like me, and I'm like maybe one of X amount of like Black people in the class, like that kind of thing. And then really interesting kind of shift around the election was, despite, so I myself and a lot of the other Black students and non-Black people of color and like white allies, like were kind of voicing like, oh, in public health we shouldn't be talking about things so abstractly, like, it's like, oh, it's a good thing that we talk about like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment and such, but we should also be talking about like the forced sterilization like that happened in like among women who are incarcerated in California like last year, like that kind of thing. And so bringing these like really relevant ongoing topics, like making sure that our classrooms weren't just like these places of theory, and that we were like talking about things that were really important and applying whatever public health lens to like 2016 or 2017. And so largely that went ignored and or received on any like spectrum of neutral to poor-ish. And then after the election, there was just like this like sudden like, oh no, like a lot of people were like, everything is so awful and what are we doing? And so like I remember having discussions with particularly the other Black women in my program, just like, oh, like, oh, we've been saying that our like classrooms are like hostile environments, and like, like, okay, now like a lot of like white people are like starting to like get it kind of thing, or like they're starting to like, oh, why don't we talk about this kind of thing like now because this just happened kind of thing. So it was like kind of a cross between being like, yeah, like, okay, like people are starting to see it, and there's this like more people are talking about it, which is good, but it's also like, well, y'all weren't listening to us before kind of thing. And so that lasted for a couple weeks, and I basically just got tired of engaging with people, and I was like, I'm just gonna let this all settle, and people can kind of figure out like their own little forays into justice up until like now. So I think that there's been kind of progressively more discussion about like, okay, well, the immigration ban, for instance, like it's like the messages, like the main reasons that like institutions seem to be rejecting it is because it's like going to interfere with like science and like kind of profitability type things. Or I'm just like, okay, but where were you, I don't know, 3 months ago when all of this like hate speech and this like really terrible rhetoric was being formed kind of thing. So I think that that's like a pattern that kind of continues, where until there is a point like like this kind of like notion of buy-in. So like when like everything around is being threatened but not anything directly affecting the institution, then it's like fine. But then as soon as the like any financial aspect of the institution is in jeopardy, they're like, hold up,
right,
wait a minute, please don't do that,
right,
kind of thing. And so I've been seeing that a lot. And so we're on like spring break, so I haven't really like the not Trump care, the Ryan care, whatever that is, like I was introduced like during break, and so I haven't really been in classroom spaces to like discuss it. But I mean, I think now that things are starting to like really seriously affect like or potentially affect like our work and like I guess it's like a profession work, that I think that and I hope that like the professions of both public health and medicine will be more vocal about like denouncing things that are very clearly like morally wrong or kind of against like our collective mission kind of thing. Like this is something I remember I was super frustrated about when Tom Price was like nominated for HHS, and like the AMA and the AAMC, they were like, well, we'll just support him and his endeavors because we believe he's good for doctors, like that kind of thing. And then like most recently they were like, no, we can't have the AHCA, that's bad, or we can't have the immigration ban because like people won't match and we need foreign medical graduates so we could exploit them, like that kind of thing. So I feel like it's going to be a lot of that from here on out, but we'll see.
Right.
Maybe it'll be good.
So positive. So positive. Well, we're getting, oh yeah, we're over it a little bit, but I want to keep having these conversations with you. I think there's a lot to be said, and obviously the American Healthcare Act is just like a recent thing. I think like over this past, what day is it? It was like 4 or 5 days ago, right? I think there is going to be a lot more to be said about what's going to happen, and it doesn't look that good, but I think it's really important to talk about it and figure out what we're going to do, because it's like this isn't really acceptable. Like it's terrifying, and I think I saw something on Twitter a couple months ago that was like, I'm just trying to find the fine line between being like knowing everything that's going on and being aware, and then also just like not being able to take it anymore. And it's like it's a new constant thing. Like post inauguration, every week I'm like want to know everything that's going on, but at the same time there's a feeling of like helplessness that I think everyone kind of feels, especially when it's not just one thing, it's one thing after another, and it's just piling up. And I think it's really important to kind of find the space and the time to talk about these things so we can like figure it out and like figure out what's going on, like what we're gonna do.
For sure.
So when you go back to Columbia, I'm going to get you on the phone. We're going to keep having these conversations. Dope. But thank you so much for coming. I know you're like on your spring break, so you're like visiting family and having fun and stuff.
Yeah.
But thanks for coming. I'm going to have to get you back in here when you're visiting home again.
Cool.
Okay, thanks, Vanessa.
No problem.
You've been listening to KUCR 88.3 FM in Riverside, streaming online at KUCR.org. I think we're going to get this online on YouTube or on Medium blog or on the website, but it is KUCR.org if you want to try to look it up. Thanks for listening.